Well, welcome back to Mr. Obsolete's Vintage Homesteading. This video is a continuation from the one we did last week about the small gasoline engine for work and play, and why I collect them and why you should too. We'll talk about brands that we didn't have in the last video. The reason that I collect these is that I use them. I use them on my tillers, my lawnmowers, my shredder, you name it, I use them for them. And neighbors are having fun. Anyway, this engine here is a Wisconsin, and it says as found. You can see Wisconsin is a old manufacturer, still in business today. They made the longest lasting heavy duty small gas engines of anyone. They had really high quality materials in them and stuff. They're really heavy compared to the other engines. Here's a for instance. Most engines like Briggs and Clinton and stuff in the later years made all their own ignition system parts and even carburetors. The ignition system on this has a Fairbanks Morse magneto. That was one of the two best brands of magnetos ever made for ignition systems. The cost of that magneto is probably almost as much as a whole Power Products engine cost when they were new. This one has a throttle right here, and your carburetor's right here, spark plug output. And the other thing that they did on almost all of these, even in the later years of production, they're all rope start. They don't have recoil starters on them. Everything's cast iron except for the cylinder head. The early ones were cast iron and stuff, but they made a big variety of engines and stuff. And so if you wanted something to last forever and spent the extra dough, this is what you wanted. So we'll be back with the next engine. Well, our next engine here is pretty unusual. This is a Pincore engine. It's a Pioneer Corporation out of Chicago that made these. It made generators and lawnmowers. This is a lawnmower engine here. It has a gear case on it. And right here is a shift lever for forward and reverse. You can see it has two sprockets on it. One is for running the reel type mower, and the other is to actually drive the wheels on the mower. The air shroud on these is real ornate and unusual looking. And it's still a flathead engine like most engines, but it was just a company that made virtually everything themselves, the lawnmower, the engine, everything. Something you just don't see anymore today. And that's one of the things when you collect small engines. There's a vast variety of them. And even if you just collect Briggs Stratton engines or Clintons or whatever, there's a multitude of models and stuff, and a lot of interesting history to go with them. So if you like tinkering with engines and hand tools and stuff like that, this is a really good hobby, because you can be somebody who just collects them and said, oh man, I've got every model ever made and all this. And the other guy said, I, like me, it just uses them and everything in between. So it's a great hobby. So we'll be back. Well, when you collect these engines and you're into history, you got a double good deal for your hobby. This one is a Rio, and that stands for Ransom E Olds. He's the guy that started the Oldsmobile car company. Originally made stationary engines, developed them into cars, and General Motors bought him out. Later on he started Rio trucks. They made those till the 60s and early 70s when they were taken over. But this was something he started out in the late 40s. Started his own lawnmower and engine company. This one is a lawnmower engine. It has a thing that's interesting. They run backwards from other engines. The output shaft actually runs off the camshaft. The engine sits at a 45-degree angle. And just a real high quality little engine. The recoil starter, they don't use a rope, they use a wire. They're again really high quality stuff. But other than the carburetor, they made virtually every part of this engine in-house. Like I say, today You'll buy an engine, it's usually China, no matter who makes it, and parts come from all over the planet. We've lost our way as far as entrepreneurship. On to the next. Well, this little engine here is a Johnson Iron Horse. They were made by the Johnson Outboard Motor Company from about 1937 until the early 40s. During World War II, they worked on a two-cycle engine, which they came out after the war was over. Started selling them on lawnmowers, and the Outboard Marine Corporation that owned this company bought the RPM manufacturing, which became Lawn Boy, and the Lawn Boy Iron Horse two-cycle engine evolved from all that. This particular engine has a hand starter on it. This was for washing machines and stuff like that, where you have low clearance. That's why the cylinder's at a slant. And the V-belt pulley here ran the washing machine. And there again, virtually every part of this, the carburetor, the ignition, the complete engine, was all made in-house. Really high quality and expensive, and that's why their demise. The Briggses were cheaper and had a lot bigger dealerships and stuff, so that's why Briggs and Stratton was always the big manufacturer. So anyway, you get the exhaust here and the carburetor's under here, your air shroud and your V-belt pulley and stuff. So here's a throttle cable up here. Okay, we'll be back with another engine. Well, here we have a Briggs & Stratton. Briggs & Stratton started about 1909. Became the largest seller of the small engines like this. And unfortunately, they just went bankrupt, so we may not have them that much longer, but they built tons of engines, really good quality engines, relatively inexpensive, controlled the whole market for years and years. This is a Model A. This is a typical layout that they used from the late 30s up through right after World War II, when they started going to smaller and lighter engines with the same horsepower. This is a rope start. Everything on it, you know, the air cleaner, all the tank, everything's all directly on the engine. Briggs made their own carburetor and ignition system again. And the output shaft, fuel bowl, exhaust system. But this is a layout that was used for many, many, many years. So we'll show you the next variation on it. Okay, this is a Model WI. The I stands for industrial. Another version of these was a WM for washing machine. These are rated from 3/4, 5/8, or 1 horsepower, depending on how fast they run them. They made them so that, like an industrial one, would run at a steady speed. So there's no throttle on the carburetor here. You set the speed with a screw, and it can't over rev because the carburetor is so small it can't get enough air to speed up and blow up. And you get the gas tank and your typical rope start, spark plug. And your output shaft. Now even this engine is smaller than the last one. It's not that much less horsepower. So like I say, technology changed it. They started making them smaller with the same horsepower as the little bigger engines they'd put out for years and years. So we'll be back with the next version. Well, this is the later version of the last motor, the WI. Same basic block and whatnot. Has an upgraded carburetor system on it, has a throttle on it. Gas tank is mounted, the carburetor actually goes, internal parts go right into the tank. Briggs used that for years and years. It's a good system, works great. Now this one Came with this one's got a hand start on it now, but a lot of them had a Kickstarter lever, and there again it was used for washing machines. Low profile, fit underneath a tub, and used them for light industrial use for running grinders and different things. And chokes right here, move that lever in and out, spark plug, exhaust system. It also has a rope pulley to start it. So, but like I say, they kept making little changes on them as they went on. Horsepower rating stayed about the same. This one has an aluminum oil pan. The earlier ones were all cast iron. Briggs started working on aluminum engines back in the 50s and perfected them by the early 60s. So we'll show you one here in a minute. Okay, here's an early aluminum engine. Everything is aluminum on it except for the shroud, the fuel tank and air cleaner and exhaust stuff. But the thing that was different on this engine from the earlier ones, when they were building and trying to make and design them and stuff, you can't run an aluminum piston on an aluminum bore because you can't have similar metals working against one another. So Briggs and Stratton perfected a process where they tin plated the piston, and they were able to do that, and these things sold billions of them. Still a lot of them in use today. But there again, the carburetor and the fuel tank are all directly connected. Has what's called an air vane governor. If the engine speeds up, there's a little vane in there and it moves back and forth, and it'll control the engine speed. It's real simple but really a good design. And you got your output shaft and stuff, and you can see the block design, instead of being more rounded, is more squared off, and that way they could put more cooling area without making the block any bigger. Just little changes like that made a lot of difference over time. So anyway, we'll be back with some more engines here shortly. Well, the little Briggs & Stratton engines we talked about earlier are all for work. Well, this one's for play. You can see it has a Kickstarter on it, and I'm in the process of finishing it up. I don't have the carburetor and stuff on it yet, but it's what's called a Model NP, and they're rated at 1 horsepower, and they were made in the late 40s through the early 50s. And so we'll be back and show you what we're going to use it on. Okay, well, here's for play. It's a 1948 Western Flyer Doodlebug scooter. It was sold by Western Auto Stores from 1946 to 1948. I made 40,000 of them. Some of them have a Clinton engine in the early years, and most of them have the Briggs NP in them like this one. They also sold them as a Hiawatha Doodlebug, but they're pretty ornate. They're highly desirable. There's a standard Doodlebug and a deluxe like this one. This one has separate throttle and brake controls. The earlier model just has one lever that does both. Doesn't work very good, but there again, collecting small engines can be a really varied hobby. You can collect just engines, or you can collect scooters, or anything in between that's got a motor on it, like me. So anyway, we'll take a couple of shots here and show you some of the different features of it. Well, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Western Auto. That was a really fun place. We had one in town where I used to live, and you could go in there and buy just about anything. You can go in and buy auto parts, washer, dryer, freezer, outboard motor, a boat, fishing gear, obviously the Doodlebug scooter, and lots of other stuff. It was just really fun. You could go in and get virtually everything you needed in one place. Can't do that anymore. Be back shortly. Well, here's another manufacturer. This is a Lawson engine. It was a John Lawson company. It goes way back. They made stationary engines, hit-miss style engines, made tractors at one point. Early 30s they started making small engines like this. This is a later one, it's about a 1947 here, but they had some interesting features on them. In most engines, on a camshaft that operates the valves, there's two lobes, one for the intake valve, one for the exhaust. Well, this one only has one lobe, and the valves are set at an angle, and so as it comes around, it opens the intake and it opens the exhaust as it goes around. Real simple design, but these were real high quality little engines. A nice big plate on it here, and a carburetor, the exhaust and the output, just like all of them. But this company was bought out by a company called Hart Carter. They sold out to Tecumseh, and so the Tecumseh designs for the early engines were actually Lawson engines. Later years they phased them out and went to the alloy engines and different things like that. So, and then eventually went out of business because they were stupid. Anyway, there's some more engine history for you. Collect old engines like Mr. Obsolete for fun and work, both. We'll see you in the next video. Remember, vintage is always better.